What are you conscious of right now? Not what you're thinking about, not what you're planning or remembering or worrying over, but right now, in this very breath, in this single flickering moment, what are you actually aware of? Notice the weight of your body where it rests. Notice the temperature of the air as it moves through your nostrils. Notice the soft hum of whatever surrounds you, the distant sounds, the nearness of your own heartbeat, if you listen closely enough. You did not have to create any of that. You did not have to manufacture it. It was simply there, waiting to be noticed, like sunlight that has always been streaming through a window you forgot to open. This is where we begin today. Not with a concept, not with a philosophy, but with this, the living, breathing, immediate fact of your own awareness. The Buddha called it the most intimate thing in the universe. And yet, for most of us, it remains the most unexplored territory we will ever encounter. To continue healing your body and soul through these ancient teachings, I invite you to join our path by subscribing to this sanctuary. Every week we return to these waters together to remember what the noise of the world asks us to forget. Close your eyes for a moment if you're able. Take one slow breath and ask yourself honestly, what is here? What is actually, undeniably, quietly here? The first insight the Buddha offered about consciousness is perhaps the most radical one. Consciousness is not something you have. It is something that arises. In the ancient Pali language, the word is vijnana, and it does not translate simply as mind or awareness in the way we commonly use those words. Vijnana points to something more like knowing, the sheer fact of cognition meeting an object. When your eye meets color, knowing arises. When your ear meets sound, knowing arises. When your mind meets a thought, knowing arises. It is not a container sitting inside your skull. It is an event like lightning, like a wave meeting shore. Think about what this means for how you have been carrying yourself. Most of us walk through life with the unexamined belief that we have a consciousness, that somewhere behind our eyes there is a self, a fixed and permanent observer watching the movie of our life. We feel it so strongly. We feel certain there is a watcher, a director, someone in charge. But the Buddha sat beneath a tree and stared into the nature of this very feeling until it became transparent. And what he found was not a watcher. What he found was watching, not a knower, but knowing, not an experiencer, but experiencing, arising and passing, moment by moment, like ripples on an endlessly moving pond. Let that land for a moment, not as a threatening idea, but as a door opening into something vast and oddly freeing. The second insight is this: consciousness is always touching something. In the Buddhist model of mind, every moment of awareness has an object. There is no such thing as pure, free-floating consciousness hovering in empty space. Awareness is always aware of something: a sound, a sensation, an emotion, a memory, a thought. This is why meditation is not about emptying the mind. That is a deep misunderstanding that causes so much frustration for people who sit on their cushions waiting for silence and feel like they are failing when thoughts keep appearing. Meditation is not about removing the objects of consciousness. It is about changing your relationship to them. Imagine a great, still lake in the mountains at dawn. The lake does not try to refuse the reflection of the trees. It does not try to hold on to the color of the sky. It simply reflects. Whatever arrives fully. Whatever passes completely. The surface of the lake is not disturbed by what it reflects. It remains water. This is the quality of consciousness that practice is cultivating, not a blank screen, a living, responsive, unclinging awareness. The third insight is one that many modern people find both liberating and unsettling. The Buddhist tradition teaches that consciousness is not located in the brain. This is not a denial of neuroscience. It is a different way of framing the question. The brain is a sense organ, one of 6 in the Buddhist map of experience. Just as the eye is the organ through which visual consciousness arises, the brain is the organ through which mental consciousness arises. But consciousness itself is not produced by the brain the way a factory produces goods. It is more like how music is not produced by the speaker, even though the speaker is necessary for you to hear it in that room at that moment. When you begin to feel into this distinction, something in you may start to loosen. That tight, anxious sense that all of this, all of your experience, all of your love and fear and beauty and grief is somehow locked inside a fragile biological machine, that there is no meaning beyond chemistry. The Buddha did not deny impermanence. He looked at it fully and without flinching. But he also pointed to the spaciousness in which impermanence moves. And that spaciousness is what he called consciousness in its deepest register. Bring your attention gently back to your breath for a moment. Just one inhale, one exhale. Feel how, even now, awareness is simply here. You did not have to do anything to make it present. It arrived with you, the way morning arrives with the light. The fourth insight concerns the layers of consciousness, and this is where the tradition becomes extraordinarily sophisticated. The Abhidharma, the ancient Buddhist analysis of mind, maps dozens of mental factors that arise and pass within each moment of experience. But for our purposes today, consider this simpler distinction. There is the surface consciousness, the busy, chattering, narrating mind that most of us identify as ourselves. And then there is something the Yogacara school of Buddhism called Alaya Vijnana, often translated as the storehouse consciousness. The storehouse consciousness is like the deep ocean floor. The surface mind with all its waves and storms is the upper layers of the sea, sometimes turbulent, sometimes glittering in the sun. But beneath all of that lies an immense quiet depth that holds the seeds of everything we have ever experienced, every impression, every habit, every moment of love and wound and wonder. These seeds are not passive. They ripen, they surface, they shape what we notice and what we miss, what we are drawn toward and what we push away, who we believe ourselves to be. Modern psychology has its own words for this: the unconscious implicit memory, the default mode network. But there is something the Buddhist model offers that pure psychology often cannot: the possibility of transformation at this deeper level. Not just cognitive restructuring, not just changing your thoughts, but actually tending the garden of the storehouse, planting new seeds through practice, through compassion, through the patient, loving act of sitting still and watching without judgment, so that over time, what rises from the depths begins to change. The fifth insight is about the relationship between consciousness and suffering. This is the heart of the whole teaching. The Buddha was not primarily a philosopher. He was a physician, a healer. He looked at the human condition and he asked a doctor a question. What is the nature of this wound? And the answer he returned to again and again was this: suffering arises not from experience itself, but from the way consciousness clings to or recoils from experience. When something pleasant arises, the mind reaches out, wanting more, wanting it to stay, contracting around it with a kind of desperate grip. When something unpleasant arises, the mind pushes away, tries to escape, hardens itself with resistance. And in between, there is a dull, habitual movement toward distraction, toward anything that creates the feeling of existing more fully without requiring presence. This threefold movement, grasping, aversion, and delusion, is what the tradition calls the three fires. And consciousness, when it is untrained, is like a dry field in which these fires spread without limit. This is why so many of us feel exhausted, not by what actually happens to us, but by the constant inner management of what happens to us. The real fatigue is not from life. It is from the unceasing effort of trying to control what consciousness touches. Here is a somatic invitation. Right now, as you listen, notice if there is anywhere in your body that is holding tension. Maybe your shoulders, maybe the space behind your eyes, maybe a subtle tightening across your chest. Do not try to release it. Simply notice it. Name it quietly within yourself. There is tension here. And then notice the awareness that is noticing the tension. That awareness is not tense. It never becomes the thing it holds. That quality, the ability to hold experience without becoming it, that this is what practice strengthens. The sixth insight is one the Zen tradition points to with particular elegance. Original mind. In Japanese it is called mushin, literally no mind, though this translation is often misleading. Mushin does not mean the absence of thought. It means the mind that is not obstructed by thought. Like clear water through which you can see all the way to the riverbed, not because there is no water, but because the water is perfectly clear. There is a Zen story of a student who came to a master and said, "I have been meditating for 10 years, and I still have not found peace." The master handed him a cup and began to pour tea. He poured until the cup overflowed. The tea ran across the table onto the floor. The student cried, "Stop, it is already full." And the master looked at him gently and said, "You come to me full of your own ideas about consciousness, full of 10 years of opinions and conclusions. How can I show you original mind when you have no room left to receive it?" Original mind is not something you create through practice. It is what remains when you stop trying to be something. It is the consciousness that was present before you learned your name, before you were told what kind of person you are, before the world began to sculpt you in its image. Children touch it constantly. The very young and the very old sometimes return to it without effort. And the meditator, in those luminous, unexpected moments of genuine stillness, glimpses it like a deer glimpsed between trees before it vanishes back into the forest. The seventh insight concerns the interconnection of consciousness and the world, and this is perhaps the most subversive teaching of all for the modern Western mind. We are trained from birth to believe in separation. There is me in here, and there is the world out there. Consciousness is the property of the individual, locked behind the eyes, ending at the skin. Everything else is outside. But the Buddhist tradition, and particularly the Avatamsaka Sutra, one of the most expansive texts in all of Mahayana Buddhism, describes a vision of reality so radically interconnected that every single point in the cosmos contains and reflects every other point. It uses the image of Indra's net, an infinite web of jewels in which each jewel reflects all the others, and in each of those reflections, all the others are again reflected endlessly, without beginning or end. What this means for your consciousness, for your awareness right now, is that what you are is not separate from what you perceive. The tree you see is not simply outside you. Your seeing of the tree arises together with the tree, in a single moment of knowing. You and the tree co-arise. You and the voice you are hearing right now co-arise. You and this moment are not two separate things that happen to be touching. You are the touching itself. This is not mystical romanticism. The more you sit quietly and watch the arising of experience, the more porous the boundary between self and world becomes. Not in a frightening way, but in a way that feels like returning home after a very long journey through foreign countries where no one spoke your language. The eighth insight is the one that brings the most immediate relief for people caught in the spiral of overthinking. In Pali, the word is papanka, often translated as mental proliferation, are the tendency of the mind to take a single experience and spin it into an elaborate, seemingly endless story. You receive one critical email from your employer, and within minutes, consciousness has constructed an entire narrative about your unworthiness, your uncertain future, your fundamental failure as a person. You wake at 3 a.m. with a slight unease, and the mind, untrained, seizes that unease and begins to weave it into catastrophe. Papanka is not a flaw in the system. It was, in evolutionary terms, an extraordinary survival mechanism. The mind that could project forward, imagine threats, prepare for difficulty. That mind kept the body alive through 10,000 years of genuine danger. But we are now using this ancient mechanism in a world where the threats are mostly narrative, mostly social, mostly internal. And so, we suffer not from lions and floods, but from the stories we tell about ourselves and our futures. Stories that feel absolutely real, stories that consciousness inhabits so completely, it cannot see that it is inside a story at all. The practice the Buddha offered is devastatingly simple and endlessly difficult. Notice when the proliferating has begun. Notice the first turn of the wheel, the moment when a simple, immediate experience begins to become something else, something larger, something laden with meaning and implication. And in that noticing, there is already a gap. Already, you have taken a single step back. You are no longer fully inside the story. You are partially watching the story. And in that watching, there is freedom. Small, perhaps, momentary certainly, but absolutely real. Breathe with that for a moment. Let your chest rise and fall. Feel the bottom of your feet. Feel the weight of your hands. This is here. The story is somewhere else. And you can choose in this breath where to place the light of your awareness. Or the ninth and final insight is the one the Buddha called the Great Liberation. It is the recognition that consciousness at its deepest level is not personal. This is the insight that dissolves the most fundamental suffering of all, the suffering of being a separate self in an indifferent universe, of fighting alone to remain intact and meaningful against the vast pressure of impermanence. When awareness turns back on itself in deep meditation, when the meditator stops looking at the contents of consciousness and begins to look at consciousness itself, something extraordinary sometimes occurs. The sense of a looker dissolves. What remains is simply looking. The sense of an experiencer dissolves. What remains is simply experiencing. The tightly wound story of me, the precious, defended, exhausting project of being this particular self, relaxes. And what is revealed is not emptiness in the bleak sense, not nothingness, but a luminous, unopen, unborn quality of awareness that the Tibetan tradition calls Rigpa, and that the Zen tradition points to with the question, what was your original face before your parents were born? I want to be clear. This is not a claim that you do not exist. You exist. This body is real. These feelings are real. This life matters with a depth that cannot be measured. But the way you have been carrying the weight of being you, the grinding, anxious, effortful project of maintaining yourself against all threats, this can be gently set down. Not through denial, not through spiritual bypassing, not through pretending the difficulties of your life are not real, but through the gradual, humble, revolutionary act of seeing that what you most fundamentally are is not the wave, but the water, not the flame, but the fire, not the particular shape consciousness is taking right now, but the consciousness itself, vast, quiet, and unafraid. You came here today perhaps because something in you is searching. Perhaps life has felt heavy recently. Perhaps you have been running from something, or towards something, or simply running without knowing why. And somewhere in you, beneath all the noise, there is a stillness that has been waiting for you to notice it. Like a friend who has been sitting quietly in the corner while the party raged, patient, undemanding, completely at peace, simply waiting for you to look up. What are you conscious of right now? Not what you should be conscious of, not what would make you more enlightened or more productive or more at peace according to some external standard, but right here, right now, in the simple miracle of this breath, what is actually, undeniably, quietly here. Whatever it is, meet it with the gentlest attention you have. Let awareness rest on it the way morning light rests on water, without grasping, without pushing away, without the need for it to be anything other than what it is. This is the path. Not a path you walk towards some distant destination, but a path that reveals itself beneath your feet with every conscious step. Ancient, patient, luminous, already yours, already home.